Hi everyone, my name is Ping-Hsuan. Thank you for tuning in. I'm presenting Coming Out for Another, Self-Positioning Against Closeted Gay Men in Indian Immigrants Coming Out Narratives. I started studying coming out back in 2015 when I came to the US for school. Before that, I used to think that coming out was something personal, and to some extent it is. But in the US, I learned that it's more than that. It's public and political. Here's a quick example. I was singing with the gay men's chorus in Taiwan, and on Facebook we got this comment from a fellow singer from Boston. He wasn't too happy when he saw that we hid our identity by blurring the photo. According to him, to come out is to change lives and to accept who we are. And later, so for an assignment in narrative analysis, I interviewed a friend who's an Indian immigrant about his coming out experience. I was wondering, how do same-sex desiring immigrant men like me think of coming out? So it's about two different sets of values meeting each other. This is the background not only for this research, but for many sexual minorities around the world. What is coming out? Let's take a look at how coming out is defined in the literature. First, it's the term for the act of naming and accepting one's same-sex emotions. To quickly unpack here, there's the coming out to self and the coming out to others component in Liang's definition. Next, coming out is a phenomenon that has become widely recognized in Western cultures as a fundamental means by which an individual constructs a sexual identity that is not heterosexual. Suanson's analysis of coming out narratives suggests that coming out is a social and linguistic process of sexual identity construction. Again, we can identify two things here. While the expression of same-sex desire can be found worldwide in various forms, describing its disclosure as coming out or disclosing it at all may not be so universal. But most of the definitions that we see are kind of neutral. What I'd like to point out is that coming out involves many power relations, and this is not discussed as much or maybe not enough. For example, let's think about the same question again and consider some of these more controversial stories of coming out in recent years. How did these attempts to come out become scandalous when coming out is usually held as a good thing? In fact, it is because people want to see coming out as a good thing that these incidents became problematic when there's a clear power imbalance at stake. So to problematize coming out, it is widely agreed that coming out is not an isolated or one-time event, but a continual and non-linear process that stretches throughout one's lifetime. Neither is it an all-or-nothing situation. Individuals can be selectively out to a group of people on preferred occasions, yet it continues to be laden with binarism and moral values. On the one hand, coming out is framed as a central narrative of a positive gay experience by which non-heterosexuals manage to be healthy and politically responsible. So this definition by Plummer is one example. On the other hand, coming out does not necessarily rid the LGBT subjects of feelings of shame and guilt. This is described as the coming out imperative. Not coming out to mark non-heterosexual as lacking or ashamed and even prone to health risks. This idealization of coming out constructs a binarism, a binary of disclosure. As Butler says, being out must produce the closet again and again in order to maintain itself as out. The theoretical framework adopted here is narrative positioning. Instead of searching who she or he really is, narrators are believed to be engaging in the activity of narrating for situated purposes. Positioning theory has its roots in the Foucauldian subject positions, which are either made available or constrained through social discourses. Davies and Harre adapted this idea into an interactional notion in the examination of a diversity of selves in discourse. It is set out to capture the elusiveness of identity as it locates the social categories that are alluded to for such construction. There are three key elements, storylines, that provide the organizational structure of discourse for interpreting what is going on. positions that are assumed, challenged, or otherwise negotiated through joint characterization of self and others, and force of speech acts that recites not a single but a mutual linguistic actions by the participants. Positioning, the process of discursively locating the self in certain storylines by performing speech acts, can shed new light on the way we conceptualize coming out and the telling of such experience. So coming out doesn't always carry the same connotations around the world or produce the same results, the forces of speech acts, when different cultural scripts, storylines are involved. When comparing oneself to someone who's not out becomes a recurring theme in many of the coming out narratives in my research, it's pretty telling that the idea of not coming out implies something. In this presentation, we'll see two narratives from two participants, Rayansh and Arjun, respectively. These are pseudonyms. In my research, I learned that although many participants had been aware of their own same-sex desire before migration, they acquired new sets of vocabularies or expressions only afterward. When the Indian participants say there was no concept of coming out back in India, it implies that a US-based model affords them a new storyline to reformulate or re-articulate their same-sex desire. For them, coming out as a speech act reconfigures their positioning in terms of sexuality as well as ethnicity and culture. Hence, they don't simply come out as gay, but as gay Indians. Their accounts offer a new perspective on being gay and coming out in the US. In the first example, Rayansh prefaces the story with an evaluated comment in line 1, hinting that what is about to come is meant to be interpreted in a humorous way. For a performance effect and to better communicate the conflicting opinions, Rayansh constructs dialogue between himself and a gay man he met on a dating website. In line 3 and 11, we can see the self is positioned in the storyline of traditional Indian way of marriage. To make a comparison, he positions the other story character as someone who holds opposite beliefs and challenges his conformity to getting married. Rayansh shows me a role reversal between the two characters. In line 20 and 21, we see a couple of years later, he actually ended up marrying a girl. Through this positioning that runs contrary to my expectation, he creates a positive image of himself that justifies the transition from his initial conformity to heterosexual marriage in the past to his acceptance of his same-sex desire now. My analysis back in 2017 stopped here, that he positions himself against this social backdrop. When I revisited the data more recently, it occurred to me that this is an example of the binary distinction that was mentioned earlier. Not only is the homo-hetero binary used to discuss the role of marriage, but also the in versus out binary is alluded to so that coming out is made possible. Think about what it means to have a normal life. For him to look back on this experience, the cultural script in the US normalizes coming out, and coming out in turn normalizes his desire. Not coming out thus becomes not normal. By recounting another person's failure to come out, Rayansh's narrative follows the storyline to make sense of the closet as well as what it means for him to be gay in the US. So here is a model to visualize the process of constructing a kind of identity by expressing desire. So same-sex desire here in this example is discursively expressed through the discussion of marrying a girl, which can be approximated to the social categories of heterosexual and homosexual. The acknowledgement or disavowal of this desire further creates two different positionings, thus contributing to the construction of a closeted versus a normal gay identity. Now we turn to the second excerpt. In the beginning of this story, Arjun makes a critique. In his opinion, these gay men, by not coming out, even though they are aware of their same-sex desire, lead a compartmentalized life. He interactively positions those who are not out as hiding to present himself as someone who does not hide himself. what Arjun says subsequently serves as a narrative evaluation, and he has kids. And I was like, okay, so the intonation is evaluative to cast doubt and possibly showing rejection of the other story character. Next, we see that this person is first described as dishonest, though recognizing his own dishonesty, and second as having bent under pressure. In the interview interaction, Arjun suspends the story and tells me he's Indian too, and that he grew up in either US or Canada, to emphasize the fact that even though both of them are Indians, Arjun, growing up in India and later coming to the US, can be out and open about having same-sex desire, while the other man, growing up in the West, yields to heteronormativity. Then, in line 30, Arjun provides his negative evaluation of the person in the story. The distinction made between India and the US can also be found here, describing the other gay man as growing up not in India but in either the US or Canada. Arjun refers to the notion that coming from a Western background should make it easier for him to come out as gay, thus rendering his excuse even more unacceptable. As such, identity is relational but far from neutral. Multiple binaries, homosexuals versus heterosexual, out versus closeted, American versus Indian, establish a hierarchy. And American or Western gay subject is positioned as the object for exemplifying the speech act of coming out. The immigrant narrators are self-positioned relationally as the shadow, who acquire both the concept of coming out and its social benefits after migration. This creates a penumbral gay other whose homosexuality is cast to the geographical periphery. An analysis elucidates the normalizing yet exclusionary force of coming out. To conclude, the binarism of coming out reconfigures same-sex desires across countries, nationalities, or even citizenships. Within the social constructionist framework, identity is relational. However, we need to recognize the power dynamics of such relation for an identity to be socio-geographically legible. In the analysis, I have attempted to problematize coming out for its binarism. As the narrators recapitulate their encounters with gay Indian men in heterosexual marriages, they position themselves as honest opposite the hiding, deceiving other. Furthermore, coming out is attributed to one's geographical relocation, invoking the homo-nationalist idea of a liberating US versus a restricting India on a socio-historical level. Viewed this way, coming out reinforces a geographically informed normativity that validates one's gay identity, while and even by discrediting another. As a result, we need to take a step back when we are examining sexuality cross-culturally and think about what coming out involves and what it takes to construct an identity, so that as researchers we are not imposing or even reinforcing the power imbalance. Thank you very much for listening, and if you have any questions or if you would like to discuss more, you can reach me and find me either through my email or even on Twitter. Thank you very much, and I look forward to hearing from you.